The descent into madness. The stone door groaned and shuddered as it opened, revealing an ancient chamber that stretched beyond the limits of the dim light from their torches. The air was thick, suffocating, and heavy with the scent of earth and decay. As Dr. Hale stepped forward, the sound of their footsteps echoed throughout the vast, dark space, amplifying the tension that hung in the air. It felt as though the walls themselves were watching them, listening, waiting. "This place, it feels wrong," Ethan muttered under his breath, his hand clutching Miranda's for reassurance. Miranda gave him a comforting squeeze but didn't respond. She, too, felt the oppressive weight of the room, as though they had crossed into something far older than the mansion itself, a place untouched by time, yet infused with a presence that was anything but natural. "This is the temple," Dr. Hale said quietly, her voice reverberating with awe and unease. "The heart of the hollow circle's power." The room before them was vast, its high ceilings lost in shadow. A series of crumbling columns lined the perimeter, and in the center stood an altar made of black stone, inscribed with symbols that twisted and writhed, as though alive. The eerie glow from the symbols on the altar cast long, jagged shadows across the floor, and there was something haunting about the way they shifted, almost as if reacting to their presence. "Whatever they were trying to summon here, it's not just a ritual," Eva said, her voice tight. "It's an anchor. A breach into the other world." Dr. Hale nodded grimly. "The ritual Lucas tried to complete wasn't just to summon demons, it was to weaken the veil that separates our world from theirs. They weren't just aiming for power, they were trying to tear a hole in the fabric of reality itself." As they cautiously moved further into the temple, they began to notice the carvings on the walls. The imagery was disturbing, depictions of monstrous creatures, creatures whose eyes seemed to follow them, mouths open in eternal, silent screams. Some were vaguely humanoid, others seemed to be made from nightmares, with tentacles and twisted forms that defied natural laws. "What happened here?" Eva whispered, her voice strained. Miranda, her face pale in the flickering light, answered softly, "This temple, it wasn't always like this. It was once a place of worship. The hollow circle twisted it over the centuries, channeling the power of the other world through it, shaping the bloodlines, and manipulating the ritual. But they couldn't break the barrier. Not until recently. Not until Ethan." Ethan winced at the mention of his involvement, but his resolve remained strong. "What exactly are we supposed to do here? How do we stop them?" Dr. Hale stepped closer to the altar, her eyes scanning the symbols that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. "We have to reverse the ritual, but it's not going to be simple. If we don't sever the connection, if we don't stop the flow of power that the circle has built up over generations, whatever they're trying to bring through will escape." Suddenly, a soft hum filled the air, vibrating beneath their feet. The glow from the altar intensified, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop dramatically. The walls seemed to shift, and a whispering sound rose from the shadows, a sound that was both distant and incredibly close. "We're not alone," Dr. Hale murmured, her voice tense. Ethan looked around, eyes wide with fear. "What is that sound?" Miranda's grip on his hand tightened. "It's the spirits, the ones the circle has bound to this place." Before anyone could react, the shadows seemed to writhe, coiling into tendrils that slithered toward them with terrifying speed. A low growl echoed through the room, and as the shadows parted, grotesque figures emerged, tall, thin, their bodies covered in dark, translucent skin. Their eyes gleamed with hunger, their mouths opening to reveal rows of jagged teeth. "They're not fully here yet," Dr. Hale said quickly, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overtake her. "The barrier's still holding them back, but not for long." Miranda stepped forward, her face set in determination. "They're drawn to the bloodline," she said, her voice strong. "They can sense it." At her words, the figures paused, their glowing eyes fixed on her. The air crackled with dark energy, and for a moment, it felt as though the very ground beneath their feet was trembling. "We don't have much time," Dr. Hale said, as she pulled a set of ancient tomes from her bag. We need to disrupt the ritual before the last of the barrier weakens. It's our only chance. Eva turned to the others, her expression determined. Let's move. The ritual unfolds. As Dr. Hale flipped through the ancient texts, deciphering the cryptic instructions written in long-forgotten languages, Miranda moved to the altar, her heart racing. The symbols on the altar had grown brighter, pulsating with an otherworldly rhythm. She could feel the pull, something ancient, something powerful, was trying to drag her toward it. You don't have to do this alone, Ethan said quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Miranda turned to look at him, her eyes filled with sorrow and fear. You don't understand, Ethan. The bloodline, it's not just a gift. It's a curse. It's been passed down to me for generations, and now I'm the one who has to end it. Ethan shook his head, his voice firm. No. We end this together. We'll break the curse together. Miranda's expression softened, and for a brief moment, it was as though the weight of the world had lifted from her shoulders. She nodded. Together, then. Dr. Hale's voice broke the silence. We need to start the counter-ritual now. The longer we wait, the weaker the barrier becomes. The group gathered around the altar, forming a protective circle. Dr. Hale began to chant from the ancient texts, her words weaving a complex spell meant to unravel the ritual that had been set in motion so long ago. As she spoke, the shadows that had crept toward them seemed to recoil, as though the very fabric of reality itself was pushing back against the creatures that sought to cross over. The air hummed with power, and the ground shook beneath their feet. The creatures watching them, their glowing eyes now filled with hunger, began to screech and claw at the air, as if trying to break through the barrier. We're running out of time. Dr. Hale shouted over the growing noise. Suddenly, the altar split with a deafening crack, sending a wave of dark energy surging through the room. The ground beneath their feet buckled and cracked open, revealing a chasm that seemed to lead into a world of eternal darkness. The creatures lunged forward, desperate to escape the confines of their prison. But just as the darkness threatened to engulf them all, Miranda stepped forward, her bloodline awakened by the ritual's counterforce. She raised her hands high, her voice joining Dr. Hale's chant. The symbols on the altar began to unravel, the power that had once bound them fading into the ether. In that moment, the room exploded with a blinding light. The final confrontation. The light surged outward, overwhelming everything in its path. The creatures screeched in agony, their forms beginning to disintegrate as they were pulled back into the rift. The darkness that had once threatened to consume them began to dissipate, retreating like a receding tide. As the last echoes of the creatures' cries faded, the altar crumbled to dust. The barrier between worlds was intact, its edge shimmering faintly in the air. But the group knew that the battle wasn't truly over. There would be more, and the hollow circle would not stop. The war between worlds had only just begun. The return to reality. The blinding light faded as quickly as it had come, leaving the chamber shrouded in silence. The air, once thick with the oppressive weight of otherworldly power, now felt strangely empty. The ground beneath them was still trembling slightly, as if reluctant to fully settle. They stood amidst the ruin of the altar, the symbols and carvings now nothing more than dust scattered across the floor. The creatures that had once surrounded them were gone, banished back to whatever hellish dimension they had crawled from. Miranda, her heart still racing, slowly lowered her hands. The bloodline within her had been both a weapon and a curse, a burden that had been passed down through generations, but now, she felt a strange sense of relief. The ritual had been disrupted, the breach sealed, but the power of the hollow circle still lingered, as if echoing through her very veins. Ethan stepped forward, his gaze locked on her. Is it over? He asked, his voice laced with both hope and caution. Miranda looked around, her face pale but resolute. It's over, for now. The breach is closed, and the hollow circle's ritual has been stopped. But the power they sought to tap into doesn't vanish so easily. Dr. Hale, who had been standing silently, staring at the remnants of the altar, turned to face them. Her eyes were full of contemplation, a deep sadness lingering in their depths. The ritual may be stopped, but the hollow circle is still out there. They won't give up. They'll find another way to break the barrier, and when they do, it'll be worse than anything we've faced. Eva, who had remained watchful throughout the ordeal, stepped forward, her expression grim. Then we need to stop them before they try again. Miranda nodded, her resolve hardening. Agreed. But we need to be smarter about it. We can't just wait around. We need to find out everything we can about the Hollow Circle. Their history, their plans, and what they've been trying to unlock. Dr. Hale gave a small, weary nod. I've been studying them for years. But even I don't have all the answers. The circle is ancient, and they've been operating in the shadows for centuries. They have a long reach and powerful allies. We'll need to find their true leader, someone who can control the flow of power that they've harnessed. Ethan clenched his fists. We'll find them. And we'll stop them, whatever it takes. The unraveling secrets. Back at their base of operations, a quiet determination settled over the group. Dr. Hale and Eva pored over the ancient tomes they had recovered from the temple, trying to decipher the remaining symbols and fragments of knowledge. Miranda and Ethan sat in a corner, discussing their next steps in hushed voices. Miranda's mind raced. She could feel the power within her still, lurking beneath the surface, like an unspoken threat. The bloodline that had tied her to the Hollow Circle wasn't fully severed. The line was broken, yes, but its echoes still resonated within her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something else had been unleashed during the ritual. Something that was neither fully gone nor fully present. Miranda, Ethan said softly, his voice drawing her out of her thoughts. Are you okay? She met his gaze, her expression conflicted. I don't know. It's hard to explain. The power, it's still there. I can feel it. It's not gone, not completely. The ritual, it only fragmented it, but it's not over. Not for me. Not for anyone. He sat down next to her, his concern evident. We'll figure it out together. I promise. Dr. Hale looked up from the texts, her face a mask of concentration. I found something. There's a mention of a key, a place where the Hollow Circle conducts its final rites. It's called the Heart of the Hollow. From what I can gather, it's a sanctuary of sorts, a place they retreat to when they need to replenish their strength. It's rumored to be located somewhere in the depths of the mountain range to the east. Eva, who had been reading over Dr. Hale's shoulder, added, if we can find this place, maybe we can destroy whatever remains of their power. It's our best shot at stopping them for good. Miranda stood up abruptly, a fierce determination filling her eyes. We leave for the Heart of the Hollow tomorrow. The journey begins. The journey to the Heart of the Hollow took them through treacherous terrain, across barren hills and dense forests that seemed to stretch on forever. The mountain range loomed in the distance, its jagged peaks shrouded in mist. As they made their way deeper into the wilderness, an eerie feeling hung over them, like they were being watched. Despite the constant tension, the group pushed forward. The closer they came to the mountains, the more Miranda felt the strange power coursing through her. It was both a curse and a gift. She could sense the pulse of the Hollow Circle, like a beacon calling her, urging her onward. But the closer she came, the more she wondered, was she becoming part of it? Was the bloodline truly gone, or was it now embedded in her forever?